When I was newly single after my 2-year relationship ended, I was back to living alone again and back to swiping on Tinder and all those apps. I had been single for a few months already, and I had met a few people in that time. During that time, I matched a girl on Tinder named Tracy, and she gave me her Snapchat, but it quickly fizzled out to her just watching my stories and not really communicating. That kind of used to happen all the time when I was in college. But now being in my late 20s using Tinder and just being reminded of how immature all this online dating stuff is, it feels a lot different at this age. I own a corner townhome in a little community. If you're wondering what I do, I'm an accountant. Good money, but miserably boring. After my ex moved out, I thought I would be ready for the privacy and peace and quiet. But I'd say after the first month, the novelty of that wore off. Maybe I'm more of a relationship person, or I just need people around, but being alone was getting to me. That's why I was constantly swiping on dating apps and trying to go on dates, just to get out of the house. This was last December. I posted something on my Snap story that had to do with Christmas, and guess who commented on my story? It was that Tracy girl who I hadn't spoken to in weeks. She struck up a conversation about us doing some Christmas-themed stuff together, and from there we started chatting for a bit. I suggested the most festive things I could think of, ice skating, going to the village, and looking at the decorations, but she suggested we decorate my Christmas tree. Firstly, I did have a fake tree, but it was up in the attic, so I told her I didn't have it up yet because it's kind of a 2-person job getting it out of the attic. She said she'd gladly come over and help, so I figured why not. I told her to come over around 9 that night. It was already dark at that point when we made the plan. It was likely like 7:30 because I remember hurriedly grabbing my keys and rushing to drive to the liquor store to buy a couple bottles of wine. When I got back to the house, I vacuumed and swept the floors. Ever since my breakup, the things my girlfriend would do to clean the place were left to me, and I realized how quickly a place can get dirty. 9 p.m. rolled around, and I was low-key sitting upright on the couch with the TV on, pretending like I was just chilling in the living room watching a movie already. Meanwhile, I had set everything up to be cozy and relaxing, but I sat there for a while, waiting on her to message me or for the doorbell. I sent a follow-up saying, "Let me know when you're on your way," and I eventually started to think she was flaking, until finally around 9:30, when she said she's outside. She came inside, and I was shocked to find that I was looking up at her. She was a couple inches taller than me. I'm 5'10", so she had to be at least 6 feet tall. I also immediately picked up on the fact that she smelled like she was drenched in perfume. We went straight to the couch and sat down, and she sat really, really close to me, like our legs were touching. This is where I started to get confused in how exactly I was feeling. She looked a bit older, maybe a little rougher, I'm not sure how to explain it. And underneath that overpowering smell of cheap-smelling perfume, I couldn't help but feel like there was a slight hint of body odor, which completely turned me off. I asked her if she wanted wine, and she said yes please. So I went and poured a couple glasses as we talked. Have you ever met someone for the first time that you'd been texting or DMing for a while, and when you finally meet, they just end up being nothing like you pictured in your head? That was pretty much this. Something about her felt off, like she lacked certain social cues. I handed her a glass of Merlot, and we cheers each other. I shit you not, she almost immediately spilled a huge drop of red wine on my light blue couch. I composed myself, but I wanted to scream. I said it's okay, as I ran to the kitchen to get a damp paper towel and sponge. I ran back to the couch and blotted it as quickly as I could before it would settle. She kept apologizing, and I kept saying it was okay. After this, it got a little more tense, and to break the tension, I suggested I get the tree out of the attic. So I went up to the attic, slid over the giant box with all the tree parts in it, and started handing her down the pieces one by one, each piece getting bigger until we got to the biggest part, the part that I wouldn't be able to handle going down the ladder on my own. She grabbed it with ease. I had to remember this girl's size. Once everything was handed down, I went back down and we assembled the tree in the living room with Christmas music playing. I poured her more wine and I drank more myself. I loosened up a bit more. Wine makes any situation feel better. Once we had the tree set up, next was the ornaments. I told her my ornaments were all in the crawl space. These ornaments were all from my childhood. My parents gave me bins and bins of Christmas decorations. So I went down to the crawl space and one by one started taking out the bins while I left Tracy in the living room to relax. As I was doing all of this, I started feeling woozy, like the wine was getting to my head. I've never been a heavy drinker, so I do have a low tolerance, but I felt like I hadn't drank that much to feel this way. I grabbed the first bin and started lugging it up the stairs. By the time I got to the top, Tracy wasn't anywhere in sight. I assumed she was in the bathroom at first and called her name. I looked around each room and then saw that the bathroom was empty. I scratched my head in confusion as I kept calling her name. I went to message her on Snap, but she never opened the Snap. I checked the 2 bedrooms too, but she was gone. I couldn't believe this. She snuck out on me. This was when I started wondering if she thought I was ugly or weird or something, even though truthfully, I wasn't even really into her either. I crashed onto the couch, which suddenly felt a lot more comfortable than before, and honestly, as far as I remember, I periodically checked my phone to see if she opened my Snap and just watched whatever was on TV, until my memory just faded to black. I swear, everything just went black. And then I woke up in darkness. No lights, no TV on. I looked around in the dark room, and I knew I was hearing things. I felt like I was still on the couch, and I felt weak. My limbs were hard to move, but I managed to find my phone right under me within seconds, and I checked the time. The second the phone screen lit up, I saw it. Even though the light was facing toward me, that glow from my phone screen with the brightness all the way up revealed the outline of a tall person's silhouette standing in front of me. For some reason, I didn't scream. I just put the phone down, bringing the room back to darkness. I finally opened my mouth to say, "Tracy," hoping it was her, but still not in that moment remembering what had happened earlier. Whoever was standing there didn't answer me. I eventually picked my phone back up and turned on the flashlight, and I saw that it was in fact Tracy standing in front of me. She wasn't moving, she was just looking down at me. I felt locked to the couch. I don't know if it was because of pure fear or the effects of whatever she had obviously laced me with. I genuinely was having a hard time moving my limbs. I felt weak and helpless. All I could manage to say was "Tracy" a couple more times. She turned towards the stairs, and again, I swear, she sprinted toward them, and all I heard were the disturbingly loud stomps of her running down the stairs. I heard something slam from downstairs. Looking back, I'd imagine it was the front door. Everything looked and sounded so wonky in those minutes after I woke up. Each passing minute, I felt more and more clear-headed, and moving became easier. I checked Snapchat to see that her account was gone, aka she blocked me. I looked out the front window and saw no cars outside besides my own and the neighbors. And then I realized I never saw the vehicle that she arrived in, or if she even arrived in one. I checked my entire home from top to bottom, checking for anything that could have been stolen. The only items I found missing seemed kind of bizarre at first, but honestly made so much sense soon after. Every last bottle of pills from my house was gone. All my vitamins and supplements, my bottles of Adderall, and even the bottle of Oxy that I had prescribed but never fully used after a surgery, those were in the drawer next to my bed. I noticed a bottle of vodka was taken from my mini fridge in my room too, but other than that, I didn't see anything else that could have been stolen. Still, I called the police right then and reported the robbery. I gave the Snapchat username and explained that I never got her number or knew anything really about her identity minus the name that she gave me, which was Tracy Gibson. The police knocked on my neighbor's door since all of our homes are attached, even though it was like 1 a.m. With me standing next to them, they questioned if he'd seen or heard anything strange, to which he said no, he'd been asleep. After about 20 minutes, the police left. I made sure all of my keys were still in place so as to make sure she couldn't get back in, but other than that, this Tracy person disappeared without a trace. I knew her behavior was quirky and wonky from the first few minutes of meeting her, and it makes so much sense now. I won't even call it a theory because I just know this is the truth. I think that girl, or woman I should say, was older than she claimed, and she was potentially homeless with a serious drug addiction. I think she drowned herself in perfume to mask the body odor that was honestly still showing through. She laced my wine with something when I was in the attic clearly. I don't know exactly how long I was out, but it was enough for her to scour my entire home for any and all drugs and supplements. I still remember how disturbing of an image it was seeing her tall silhouette standing in front of me while I was just waking up on the couch. Honestly, after this, I didn't even decorate the tree that year. This happened on Christmas Eve back in '97 when I was 7 years old. Since we're Jewish, we don't celebrate Christmas, so Christmas Eve was just like any other night for us. Our dad is a doctor, and since he's Jewish, he always works on call at the hospital during the Christmas holidays, so he wasn't home tonight. That just left my little sister and I by ourselves for the evening while our dad worked. Technically, our mom was home, but to be blunt, she was an alcoholic. Back then, being a 7-year-old, I had no idea what alcoholism was. All I knew was that my mom was always passed out once it got dark and near impossible to wake up. Sorry if it sounds harsh or TMI, but it's relevant to my story. My sister and I were downstairs watching TV when we heard a knock at the door. Being the oldest, I went to see who it was. Our door had glass panes built into it, which made it easy to see who was on the other side. There was a man standing outside in a Santa suit holding a bag, and when he saw me, he smiled and waved at me to come to the door. I went near the door but did not open it, and I thought it was odd that someone dressed like Santa would come to our house out of anyone's house in the neighborhood. He said, "Hey kid, it's me Santa. Let me in, I'll give you your presents." I remember point blank telling him that Santa isn't real, and that if he was, he doesn't give Jews presents anyway. That's when he said, "Of course I'm real. In the past, I only used to visit Christian homes, but lately, I felt bad that Jewish kids never get any presents. So this year, I changed the rules so that you can get presents too." But I didn't buy it, and instead, I remember getting mad at him, arguing that Jews get presents, we just get them during Hanukkah and not on Christmas. The smile fell from his face, and all his jolly charm disappeared as he began demanding I open the door. I told my sister to dial 911, and the guy seemed to run away. We did call the cops. However, unfortunately, the operator didn't understand what we were saying. Looking back, I think she may have thought we were just little kids excited that Santa Claus was coming to our house. Regardless, she didn't take us seriously, and instead just told us that this number was to be used for emergencies only before disconnecting the call. My sister and I now got really scared because we didn't know who else to call. Since we were only 4 and 7, the only numbers we knew how to dial were our home number and 911. And since this is the 90s, my dad didn't have a cell phone yet, and I had no idea what the hospital number was to reach him there. And with our mom impossible for us to wake up, we were essentially on our own. We hoped the man wouldn't come back, but a few minutes later, he was knocking on the door again. He said he knew the cops weren't coming and to go ahead and let him in or we'd be in big trouble. My sister started crying and ran upstairs trying to wake my mom. Not knowing what else to do, I did the one thing that made sense to my 7-year-old brain. I grabbed a bunch of candles we keep for our menorah and lit them all, then ran below where the smoke detector was. I blew out all the candles quickly before tossing them all up to the smoke detector. Thankfully, they gave off enough smoke to set off the smoke alarm. As an adult, I realized how stupid this was, and fortunately, I did not accidentally set the house on fire. But at that time, all I knew was that the smoke alarm would instantly call 911 for me and send help to our home. There was a fire department not even 2 minutes from our house, so they got here pretty fast. My sister came downstairs, scared of the fire alarm, but I told her there was no fire and to not go outside, but instead wait inside with me. To my amazement, the guy still did not leave. Instead, the bastard ran to the firefighters, presumably telling them that he was glad they showed up. I remember that he claimed he was my dad, and that he dressed up like Santa Claus for Christmas Eve to surprise us. He explained that his suit didn't have any pockets to hold his keys, and that with the door locked, he couldn't get the door open to save us from the fire, so he begged the firefighters to break down the door, and surprisingly, the firefighters seemed to believe him. They were actually getting ready to break down the door, and told us to stand back, but we started crying, shouting at them that he's not our dad, that our dad is working at the hospital and that we have no idea who this guy was, and that we don't even celebrate Christmas. The firefighter who was about to break down the door thankfully stopped and listened to us. He asked, "You don't celebrate Christmas?" I told him no because we're Jewish, and showed him my kippah on my head as well as our menorah. I then broke down crying, explaining how I set off the smoke alarm to try and get help because the police wouldn't believe us, and to please not let the guy in. The firefighter thankfully believed me, and then asked the guy why Santa would show up to a Jewish home. I don't remember exactly what the guy said, but the firefighters clearly didn't believe him. 2 of them wrestled the guy to the ground while the other called the police to come by. They also asked what hospital my dad worked at so they could let him know what was going on. The police arrived and arrested the guy, while another officer stayed with us until my dad came home and explained the situation to him. My dad was furious with our mom for being wasted and essentially sleeping through the whole thing, but mostly he was grateful that we were okay. As far as Christmases go, I was glad to have our usual boring and quiet Christmas the following year. To this day, I think being Jewish saved my sister and I's lives, because had we opened that door to let Santa in, there's a good chance that would have been our final Christmas. It was December 2022. My girlfriend Charlotte and I were driving to the Pocono Mountains. We had rented a super cozy looking Airbnb decked out with Christmas decorations, and it was nicely located with a nice view, big property, and not far from a cute little village. To make things even more festive feeling, there was a snowstorm coming that night, so we set out on the road a little earlier to allow us time to get groceries and everything set up in the Airbnb. From the city to the Poconos was about 4 hours. We made decent time. We stopped at a Family Dollar for some snacks and groceries, and then we went straight to the Airbnb. We turned towards the uphill gravel road through a clearing in the trees that led to the property. The house was surrounded by woods. It had a big deck with a hot tub on it, which was very appealing, especially the idea of sitting in it during a snowstorm. There were a bunch of Christmas decorations on the property, including some light-up reindeer, a big snowman, and big decorative candy canes lining the walkway to the front deck. We had to take a few trips to and from the car to bring everything inside. First impression, the place had a very comfy feeling as we expected from the pictures. It had a Christmas tree in one corner, stockings hung on the walls, and a bunch of smaller decorations scattered about. It had that very welcoming smell of wood that you'd expect in a country log cabin, though it was more so just a regular house. Then I realized why. There was a stack of logs next to a big fireplace in the living room. There were 3 bedrooms, though of course we only needed 1. We put our luggage and such in a second bedroom. I did the usual stuff like inspect the fridge, turn on the TV to see if there's cable or Netflix, and look out all the windows. There was an upstairs, but it was more of a loft with a pool table and a couple of couches. Then there was a basement. For the hell of it, I went down to check out the basement. It was fairly big relative to the size of the house. It felt disconnected from the Airbnb though. It wasn't furnished for hanging out in. It was dark and cold and felt more like a space to do laundry and a workspace. Then there was a knock at the front door. I hurried up to answer it, and there was a guy who looked to be in his late 40s. He was wearing gray sweatpants and a ripped up yellowish brown jacket. He smiled at me and said, "How are you folks doing?" I replied good and asked him if he was the Airbnb host. He replied he runs the place with his brother. I asked for his name, and he said Tom. Tom said he lives just up the road next door if my girl and I need anything. I thanked him, and then he walked away. I found it interesting that he knew I was with my girlfriend. Charlotte didn't come to the door, but maybe his brother told him about us. I did have a conversation with Mike, the host, about it being my girlfriend and I wanting to do something festive. It was pitch black out and it was snowing. We cranked up the heat in the house and started preparing the dinner we bought, which was chicken thighs, broccoli, potatoes, and cornbread. It was pretty grab bag. We ate on the couch with the Christmas tree lights on in the corner, giving the room a nice comfy glow as we watched the Polar Express. It was the only good Christmas movie on any of the streaming platforms. If you can't tell, we really love Christmas. After the movie, and when we felt we had digested enough, we went outside to the deck to hop in the hot tub. I turned on all the decorations and Christmas lights in the front yard, and as we sat in the hot tub watching the snowfall, it felt like bliss, until the bubbles on the hot tub stopped, and it went silent. We heard unmistakable footsteps from somewhere on the property. Charlotte and I looked at one another. I asked her if I should shout who's there, but she said no. The footsteps moved further and further until they were no longer audible. I told Charlotte it was probably a deer, but deep down I knew those were the footsteps of a person. After the hot tub, we went to take a shower before bed. The hot water in the shower didn't last for more than maybe 2 minutes though. Something was wrong. When the water turned ice cold, we screamed and jumped out of the shower. I messaged Mike, the host, about it. He responded within half an hour saying that's odd and that he'll have a guy come and look at the hot water heater tomorrow. We went to sleep after our half shower. In the middle of the night though, we awoke to very aggressive bangs on the front door of the house. Charlotte was shaking me, terrified. I said I'm gonna check who it is, but she demanded I stay in the bed and don't make a sound. Honestly, I was glad she said that. No part of me wanted to know who was at the door in the middle of the night. I think there were 3 sets of really loud and angry sounding bangs before they stopped. We sat upright for a few minutes in silence, whispering to each other. I went over to lock the bedroom door for added security, I guess. Minutes dragged along, but ultimately, after about half an hour of sitting wide awake, we eventually drifted back off to sleep. First thing in the morning, I messaged Mike again about the knocks at the door. He answered more quickly this time, seeming pretty confused like us. He basically said how strange that is. He didn't know why anyone would be roaming around late at night like that. He said if anything like that happens again, that we should alert the authorities. Honestly, not the most reassuring response, but I mean, he was right. What else could he tell us? Grab a gun and shoot whoever was at the door? I didn't want to keep complaining to Mike constantly, but I mean, these were some valid concerns I was bringing up to him. There was a lot of snow outside, and it was a dark, cloudy day. There were still some flurries falling onto the ground. I went out to wipe the snow off my Jeep, and while I was doing so, I noticed footsteps in the snow. They looped around the house. I remembered the knocks from the night before, and wondered if it was from the same person. But these footprints looked fresh, and it snowed all night. Surely the footprints from last night would have filled in by now. I heard footsteps approaching now, actually, and I saw Tom walking from around my car. I told him about the hot water heater problem, and that Mike said they were sending someone to take a look at it. He said he knew and that he was here to take a look at it, actually. I also told him about the knocks at the door last night and the footprints in the snow. I even showed him. He looked at them and said there's a lot of strange folk out here that go snooping around at night. I asked if we should refrain from using the hot tub at night then, and he said no, that shouldn't be a problem. The people around here are harmless. He went inside into the house and walked around for a bit before walking down to the basement. He told me he'll have a look at the hot water heater. Tom seems like a weird dude, honestly. I messaged Mike saying Tom's here now checking out the water heater. Mike replied back asking, is Tom the name of the plumber? And I replied, no, your brother. He replied, what do you mean? He said he's my brother? It started to click in my head. I responded, do you have a brother named Tom who runs this Airbnb with you? And he replied, no, who is this person? I hurried to Charlotte and told her to collect her things quietly. We need to get out of here. As quickly as we could, we packed our bags, grabbed all of our stuff, and brought it outside to the car in one trip. I'm sure we left behind a charger or something small, but who cares? We got in my car, and when I started it, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw Tom quickly approaching the rear of the Jeep. I put it in drive and drove out of there as quickly as I could. When we were back on the road, we called Mike and explained everything and told him he needs to call the police now. He didn't stay on the line with us for long, but 20 minutes later, he called us back. We were in the car still. He said the police were there now and didn't see anyone in the house. Mike was on his way to the house as well, but he was mostly calling to get more details from us. We drove around the area and explored just as a way to calm our nerves after what just happened. After a few hours, we drove home. Mike messaged me later that night updating me and apologizing for everything. He said he didn't know anyone who resembled my description of Tom. What disturbs me is that man was watching us the entire time, from the moment we arrived to when we were in the hot tub, and he was probably the one banging on the front door in the middle of the night. Who knows what his intentions were? It's a good thing we left when we did, though. This happened when I was 18. I'm 22 now. I live in San Antonio, Texas. It was my senior year of high school, but this was when COVID just started blowing up, so everything began to shut down, including my school. Even though everyone was supposed to be staying home and being in quarantine, my friend group and I were going out more than ever. There wasn't much to do since all the non-essential businesses were closed, but one thing about me, I love urban exploring, or exploring haunted places. To this day, I still do. I'm not one to scare easily. I've had a couple experiences with the homeless, cults, even had a gun pointed at me, but nothing compared to how odd and creepy this one instance I came across while exploring was. Moving forward, around this time I started talking to a girl who I had a class with in high school. Her name was Clarissa. If it weren't for her matching my alibi of what happened this night, I'm sure none of my friends would have believed me. We were still kind of freshly dating, but I somehow convinced her to explore a wooded natural park at 3 a.m. here in San Antonio. The park is called O.P. Schnabel. It's relatively nice, safe, and very scenic during the day. But at night, it can be a dangerous place, and police usually roam the entrances to the area at night, keeping people away. In 2016, a 24-year-old woman named Lauren Bump was brutally murdered and stabbed over 20 times, and in 2021, a boy exploring the woods was shot. Clarissa and I get to the park around 3 a.m. It's super creepy and pitch black. The trees do a really good job at covering the moonlight. I don't like to have my flashlight on because then my eyes can't adjust to the darkness, and you can really only see what's lit up from the light. Plus, I wouldn't want someone to see my light from a far distance, so I like to keep them off while exploring. We were probably about 15 to 20 minutes in walking the main trail. I didn't plan to be in there for too long because it was kind of creepy and oddly quiet that night. I knew a trail that goes off the road that leads back to where my truck was parked. I told her we could take that trail, essentially making a full circle, instead of walking all the way back around. She agreed, and so we began walking through that off-road trail. We were probably only about 2 minutes into the off-road trail, when suddenly, out of nowhere, a flute began playing. Clarissa and I stopped dead in our tracks and looked at each other, just listening. Whoever was playing it, it was super in cadence and sounded like it was playing some sort of piece of music. However, there was no time for me to process that it may have sounded good. It was creepy as fuck. As I said before, I don't scare easily, but 15 seconds into the flute solo, Clarissa began trembling in fear and on the brink of crying. I was kind of just listening, but when Clarissa started praying to God to save her and forgive her for her sins, that's when I realized the severity of the situation. To be clear, it was super hard to pinpoint where the sound of the flute was coming from. It sounded like it was coming from the direction of the previous main trail, which was parallel to where we were, with about maybe 30 to 50 yards of woods in between. But it was getting louder and closer, to the point where it sounded like the sound was right on top of us. Clarissa couldn't even focus because she was so scared, so I knew I had to man up and get us out of this situation. This is gonna sound corny, but I told her, "Don't worry, I'm not gonna let anything happen to you," and told her that we should run down the off-road trail to get away. So we did. We began to sprint. I believe the flute stopped playing, but it was hard to notice because I was more focused on getting the hell out of there. We only got about 30 feet, when out of nowhere, we heard the rustling of bushes and the snapping of leaves and twigs before something big dashed across the trail right in front of us. Now, this could have very well been a deer or some sort of bigger wildlife, but it was so strange because I could almost feel the size of whatever was in front of us. I don't know if it was from the wind or what. The only thing is, I never saw a silhouette or a shape of anything in front of us. Another strange thing is, I didn't hear it coming and I didn't hear it run away. I only heard the dash right when it was right in front of us. As soon as we felt and heard whatever dashed across the trail right in front of us, we obviously turned back around and bolted in the other direction until we got back to the original point where we heard the flute. And then, as if whoever was playing it was waiting for us to return, the flute started to play again, loud and right on top of us. This time it was almost chiming. It sounded like it belonged to some sort of Irish jig song or something, but the chiming was still in cadence. However, it was still impossible to pinpoint where the sound was coming from. It was just surrounding us. At this point, my fight or flight instincts kicked in because we were trapped. We had two options. Either go back into the off-road trail where we heard that terrifying dash right in front of us, or go back to the main trail where the flute and whatever psychopath was playing it was at. The off-road trail was definitely scarier because it was darker and surrounded by more dense forest, and at least the main trail was a cement path. Thus, I told Clarissa, who was still trembling in fear, let's start running down the main trail back to the truck. We ran back. Adrenaline was still pumping, so we cut the 20-minute walk into a 7 to 8 minute jog. And somewhere along the run, the flute noise must have stopped. Along the run back, there was a random porta potty, and I was scared to death because what if someone was on the other side or hiding inside of it, because it seemed to be somewhat parallel to where we were at earlier. Thankfully, I didn't see anyone, or signs of anyone ever having been there. In fact, my truck was the only vehicle in the area near the main entrance to the woods. We made it to the truck, and I sped far away from there. The next day, I told all my friends about it, and I looked all over the internet to see if anyone's ever come across anything like this. People claim to run into ghosts, cults, animals making terrifying noises, but a soft and rhythmic flute solo, I couldn't find anything on that. Or maybe I just didn't look hard enough. I tried to figure out all the possibilities. There are some houses that eventually led into a neighborhood on the far edge of the woods, but those houses are at least a couple miles away, and we were fairly deep into the woods, so there's no way the sound could have traveled that far because I'm telling you, the flute was clear as day and it was 3 a.m. Obviously, I never found out who was playing that flute, or what dashed right in front of us. I actually kind of got chills writing the story. The more I think about it, it actually seems more paranormal, rather than something scary on a tangible level. I don't know if it was a person, ghost, cult, or what. I'm really hoping someone might have a rational explanation. Either way, I never really went back to those woods at night. I still explored plenty of creepy places, but never really came across anything like that ever again. I'm a 20-year-old guy. I work at a medium-sized hospital in northwest Alabama as a pharmacy technician. I work an early night shift, 6 p.m. to 4 a.m. I'm also in charge of stocking the surgery rooms. I work for 7 days in a row, and then I have 7 days off. Working the 7 sucks, but the 7 off feels amazing. I work Thursday through Wednesday, and on my 6th night working, a Tuesday, I left a little early to go stay with my wife at her aunt's house, about 30 minutes away from our house. She was babysitting her little cousins while her aunt and uncle were on a trip. The house didn't have any curtains, so she felt uneasy for the few nights she was there. I didn't go with her at first because it was during my work week, and she told me there was really no point if I was going to get there around 5 a.m. and then go to sleep once the sun started to rise. But on her last night babysitting, she felt extremely anxious, so I told her I was coming over. She is stubborn, but she thanked me and felt so much better once I arrived. Working the night shift for the last 2 years has really taken a toll on me mentally, and I think I've started to develop some slight insomnia. I literally could not go to sleep after getting to my wife's aunt's house. This isn't anything new, but I had never stayed up for more than about 28 hours before. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't sleep because we had a really big day ahead of us. We had to drop her little cousins off at school, our friend was having a gender reveal party, we had to go shopping because we had no groceries at home since she had been away for the last 3 days, and I had to be at work at 6 p.m. I ended up falling asleep in the car for a little less than 10 minutes. I was really feeling that wave of sleepiness come over me, but I ended up getting a huge Red Bull and another energy drink once I got to work. I had my wife drive me to work and pick me up since my brakes needed to be changed and I wasn't driving my car, and also because neither of us trusted myself to drive her car on over 24 hours of no sleep. It was Wednesday night now, and I had been awake since about 2 p.m. on Tuesday afternoon. My shift started out fine. If I could stay busy, that tired feeling wouldn't really get to me. I put in my earbuds and was listening to music as I was stocking the surgery rooms with their meds. It was a weeknight, so there were still some late surgeries finishing up, and housekeeping was cleaning up some operating rooms that had been used. It's not uncommon for surgery personnel to come into the room I was in and grab something that the room they were using may be out of, so I usually turn around and at least smile, and they smile back. I was in my own little world, stocking the Omnicell machine with meds and listening to music, when I heard the door behind me open. There was that distinct high-pitched squeal when a door needs its hinges to be oiled. It made the loud crash that heavy wooden doors make when they shut, so I turned around to see who it was like always, except there was no one there. I didn't really get worried about it. Maybe they opened the door and saw I was in there and just decided to go to another room, so I continued on. As I pushed my cart to the next room, the light in this room was off. I opened the door, And I swear, I saw someone hunched over by the Omnicell machine, digging through the sharps bin. If you don't know what that is, it's a bin where you dispose of needles and vials after use instead of just putting them in a normal garbage can. Someone had already been caught doing this before in search of morphine and consequently was fired. I turned on the light and was going to ask what they were doing, but when I turned the light on, there was no one there. Okay, now I was starting to get a little creeped out. I didn't know the time frame of when you could start hallucinating after not sleeping for over 24 hours, so I just told myself I was probably seeing things and needed to just calm down. I finished up stocking surgery with no other occurrences and headed back to the pharmacy. At 2 a.m. every night, we have to deliver patient-specific medications to the nurses' station. I'm going to use the 5th floor as an example of how the floors are laid out, but each floor number corresponds with which floor they were on. There are 3 elevators in the middle of the floor. If you go left when getting off the elevator, there's the 5100 and 5200 side, and if you go to the right, there's the 5400 to 5500 side. There are 2 wings on each side, so there are patient rooms numbered 5105 to 5115, and the other wing has rooms 5201 to 5215. Each floor is laid out the exact same way, so each wing has 15 rooms on each side. To shorten the floor names though, I'm going to refer to them as 51, 52, and 54, 55. Recently, the 5th floor, specifically the 54-55 side, had been undergoing some remodeling, so our overflow floor, the 3rd floor, was where they put the patients who were on the 54-55 side of the 5th floor while they remodeled. The 54-55 side was empty because there weren't that many people in the hospital that night. I made my way up the hospital, delivering meds to the nurses' station floor by floor, until I got to the 5th floor. I went to the 51-52 side, delivered the meds, and decided to go check out the progress of the 54-55 side. As I went over there, I just got creeped out. There were no nurses, no patients, just the long, empty hallways. The surgery rooms are already empty and desolate most nights, so I'm used to walking around down there no problem. But seeing empty patient rooms just creeped me out. I walked slowly down the 55 side. I heard a noise that sounded like one of the hospital beds rattling. As I passed 5512, I quickly found out what the noise was. As I looked into the rooms, I saw an old man violently shaking as if he was having a seizure. Blood was running down his eyes, nose, and out of his mouth. He was making this gargling, groaning sound, almost like the sounds the zombies in The Walking Dead make. A monitor was frantically beeping like it does when a patient is coding. My heart dropped when I saw this, and I took a quick step behind the doorframe. I immediately stepped back into the room as I realized this man was in desperate need of medical attention. But when I looked back in there was no man. This bed was clean and made. The monitor was off, and there were no signs that anyone had even been in that room for at least a whole day. I thought at that point I was for sure hallucinating. I quickly made my way back over to the elevators, and I made my way back down to the 1st floor where the pharmacy is. As the elevator doors opened, an old man in a security shirt and hospital badge got on the elevator. He patted my shoulder as he walked past me. It was that same man I had seen moments before having a seizure and making those zombie-like noises. He smiled at me as the doors closed, and I watched the numbers on the elevator go all the way up to the 5th floor. I didn't push the button for the elevator to come back down, but the same elevator came back down to the 1st floor and opened. There was no one on the elevator. I ran back to the pharmacy and sat in a chair for the rest of my shift until my wife came and picked me up. As I was waiting, I googled when hallucinations start when you haven't slept. It said between 30 and 48 hours, and I was on hour 38 of no sleep, so it made sense. The pharmacy is located directly under the 54-55 side, so when I walk in, I can see the window at the end of the hospital wing on the 24, 34, 44, and 54 side. Sometimes, as I wait on the elevator on that side to go back down to the pharmacy, I look out the window. As I was walking out to my wife's car, I looked back up at the 5th floor window and saw the same old man looking at me through the window. I got chills as I got into my wife's car. I didn't say anything about what I saw that night. I'm not sure why I would have hallucinated that specific man, as I've never seen him before, and even if I have, he has no significance in my life whatsoever. I'm still not sure, though, if that was even a hallucination, or if what I saw that night was real. It certainly felt real. I went to sleep immediately after getting home. I've not seen that man again, but this was just under 2 weeks ago. I live with my boyfriend in his house that he owns. It's a modest house in a good neighborhood. Violent crime here is typically low. I say it's a modest house because compared to the other houses in the neighborhood, it's on the smaller side. But having a smaller house in this neighborhood is still very desirable because it allows us to still live in a nice town without owning a multi-million-dollar home. It's a single-floor, 3-bed and 2-bathroom house with a basement. We're on a very quiet block with a lot of privacy. The way the street curves provides this optimal privacy, as when we step outside of the house, there's not a single neighboring house directly facing us. There are 8 houses total on our block. Further down the block is a small wooded area. My boyfriend Mika was away one weekend in Vegas for a bachelor party last October. I was alone from Thursday to Monday. Friday after work, I had some of my girls over for a wine night. At some point while we were in the living room watching scary movies, the doorbell rang. We all went quiet and looked at one another with the same faces. The doorbell ringing late at night while watching a scary movie almost felt not real. I went to go sneakily see if I could see who was outside on the porch, but I couldn't get a view from the window. There is a tiny glass panel at the top of the door, so I peeked through it. There were like 4 cars in the driveway. They had to know people were home, but I didn't see anyone on the porch. I went back to my friends, and while we all agreed that was weird, we accepted that it was just a very unfortunately timed ding-dong ditch. After everyone left, it was late enough for me to go to bed and fall asleep right away. But I was awoken that night, not even an hour later, to the doorbell ringing twice. I looked at my phone and it was like 1 a.m. No one belongs outside your door at this hour. I immediately called Mika, and he picked up sounding really drunk in a loud bar. He had to go to a bathroom to be able to hear me. Once he heard me, he told me to just stay in the bedroom and not open the door to anyone. He never once suggested calling the police, so I refrained from doing that for now. We ended our call, and I tried to just stay calm and go back to sleep. Just as my heart rate started to slow and I started to calm down, I heard something from outside. Some kind of clicking sounds until there was a knock at my window. And a male's voice said, "Hey, anyone home? I need some help out here." I thanked the Lord the blinds were closed. I couldn't see who was out there, and they couldn't see me. Instead of leaving, he knocked again on the window. He said, "I know you're home." This was what prompted me to call the police. I never heard the man outside walk away from the window. For all I knew, he was still standing outside of it. So I whispered the entire time while on the phone, reporting someone trying to break into my house. Call me dramatic or an embellisher, but I was scared and I wanted the police here ASAP. Within 5 to 10 minutes, the doorbell rang again, followed by loud knocks. I went out and approached the front door and asked who it is. A male's voice said it's the police. It was a different voice from the other guy. I looked through the glass and confirmed it was a couple police officers. I opened the door for them, and right off the bat, the taller officer in front walked right into my house without my even inviting him in. He said they were responding to my report of a disturbance, and I said there's a man lurking around the house ringing the bell and knocking on my window. I don't want to make a big part of my recounting this story about this particular police officer, but he was the rudest man I'd ever met. I felt like he was on a power trip. He was demeaning towards me, telling me to shush and talking over me while I was trying to explain. He also didn't seem to take my claims very seriously. His partner didn't say a word, he just stood in the back. The taller one asked me details that I'd already made clear I wouldn't have, such as what the man looked like, when I clearly stated that I hadn't seen him, and the officer actually said to me, "Well, you're the one who called us, ma'am. If you don't want our help, we can leave." I was taken aback completely. I'd never called the police before, and I never expected such a lack of professionalism. I apologized and said I'm just scared. It was around this time that the 2 officers walked around the house with their flashlights. They went full circle and then came back, but honestly, they didn't really check very thoroughly. I watched them through the windows. They came back to the door and told me there's nothing they can do if I don't have any cameras or proof of the man trying to commit any wrongdoing. The 2 cops then left. I didn't feel any better at all, besides the fact that maybe whoever that man was saw I called the police. I went back to bed, And thankfully, the next time I woke up was to sunlight creeping in through the closed blinds. It was around 10 a.m. It was Saturday, and that night my friend was having a Halloween party that I was going to help set up for. During the day, I did a little grocery shopping, and while I was at it, picked up some things for the party. My costume was Velma from Scooby-Doo, and my friend throwing the party was Daphne. I got to her house around 6 p.m. The party started at 9, and it really picked up around 10:30. I was there pretty late, like I probably left her house a little after 1 a.m. I was good to drive, as I didn't really drink much besides a few beers. When I got home, I immediately noticed a cool draft in the house. After setting my things down on the dining room table, I noticed a window open. I went to shut it, trying to remember why I would have opened it. I went to brush my teeth, but then when I came out from the bathroom, I noticed the basement door was wide open. I froze. This was when I started hearing this faint but consistent clicking sound. As I got closer to the basement stairs, I realized it was coming from down there. And then I got to the top of the stairs, and I looked down to the pitch black basement, and the clicking suddenly stopped. A voice from below suddenly said, "You're finally home." With that, I slammed the basement door shut and took my phone with me outside. I banged on the neighbor's door until he answered, and I chose to call the police in the safety of my neighbor's house. It was unfortunately the same 2 officers who returned to my house. My neighbor accompanied me as I went to speak with them this time, and I think that may have had some kind of impact on that taller cop's attitude. He wasn't as rude this time. He and his partner checked the house while my neighbor and I stood in the living room. Eventually, after their initial search, I showed them some of the spots I'd imagined someone could be hiding. I basically tore the entire house upside down, while also on the phone with my drunk boyfriend. When I was sure that no one was here anymore, I packed a bag to go stay with my sister until Mika came back. This time I locked every window before leaving. The main takeaway lesson from my story is if you have windows that open wide enough for someone to crawl through, make sure they're always locked when they're closed. We still live in this house today, but for a few months, I refused to be alone in the house for extended periods. I still have PTSD from this, and sometimes I have nightmares in which I think I'm hearing knocks at the window, and then I wake up